He advertised for a mail-order bride, and 3 women traveled from afar, only to flee running the same day upon seeing where he lived. But the 4th, when she stepped onto that veranda that creaked over the chasm, she did not run. She stayed. You can imagine the despair of a good man who sees a bride step down from the buggy for the 3rd time, full of hope, and climb back up half an hour later with eyes wide with panic. He was not violent, not ugly, not poor, but his home was in a place that sent a shiver down the spine of any outsider. This story took place in the remote Victorian High Country in March of 1912 on an isolated property 6 kilometers from the township of Maclay's Gap, where the wind cut the skin and the silence of the night was only broken by the sound of stones rolling down the escarpment. Since you've made it this far, let me ask you a quick favor. Write down in the comments where you're watching us from, which city, which state, or even what country you're in. I love knowing that these old stories reach so many different places. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click the button, because every Sunday there's a new story of overcoming, love, and emotion from those times of yesteryear. Now, come with me, because this story will move you from beginning to end. Clara O'Connell was 28 years old when she picked up that newspaper. She was sitting in the tiny parlor she shared with 3 other women at Mrs. Mavis's boarding house in Melbourne, a city that was growing too fast and had no mercy for those who stumbled. The February afternoon seeped through the narrow window, bringing the smell of dust and horse manure. Clara held the High Country Chronicle open to the classified section, her thin fingers marking the delicate paper already yellowed by the sun. Good man, 34 years old, established timber worker in the bush. Seeks wife of good character for an honest life and companionship. Send letter to Elias Thompson, Maclay's Gap Township, care of the local post office. It wasn't the prettiest advertisement. It didn't promise wealth or comfort, but it had a naked honesty that touched something inside her. Clara read it 3 times before folding the newspaper. She thought about the word companionship, not love, not passion, not family, companionship, as if the man knew that life had already stripped away any illusion of a fairy tale and only wanted someone to divide the burden of the days with. She knew well what that burden was. 6 months earlier, Clara O'Connell was a respected teacher at Street Lucy's girls' school, where she taught the first letters to girls from well-to-do families. She earned little, but enough to rent a decent room and buy fabric for 2 dresses a year. She had students who adored her. She had routine. She had dignity. Until Mrs. Beatrice Higgins, the mother of a mediocre student, decided her daughter deserved better marks and that Clara was favoring the girls from richer families. The accusation was ridiculous. Anyone with eyes could see that Clara treated all students with the same firm patience. But Mrs. Higgins was the school principal's sister-in-law and had a sharp tongue. She spread word throughout the city that Clara O'Connell was selling grades, accepting gifts from rich families, and was dishonest and self-interested. None of it was true. None of it mattered. The principal, a weak man who feared his sister-in-law more than his own conscience, called Clara one August afternoon and told her softly that it would be best if she tendered her voluntary resignation to avoid a greater scandal. Clara felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. She asked to defend herself, asked for an investigation, asked for justice. He averted his gaze and repeated that it would be better for everyone that way. Clara left that school with her cloth bag slung over her shoulder and her eyes dry from the internal burning. She tried to get another position. She sent letters to 5 different schools. None replied. The rumor had already spread. No one wanted a teacher with a tarnished reputation, even if the stain was a lie. Unemployed, Clara burned through her savings in 3 months. She sold her 2 good dresses, keeping only her patched working ones. She moved from her comfortable house to that boarding house where 6 women shared a bathroom and kitchen. All the women there had similar stories. Women without family, without a husband, without luck, women that the city spat out to the margins. Clara had no real family. She was the only child of parents who died of bush fever when she was 14. She was raised by 2 spinster aunts who taught her to read, write, embroider, and behave. The aunts also died, one from a stroke and the other from grief. Before Clara turned 20, she was alone in the world, clinging only to her profession as a teacher as a life raft, and now she didn't even have that. On that February afternoon, with the newspaper in her hand and her stomach aching from hunger because she had skipped lunch to save money, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She borrowed paper, a pen, and ink from Mrs. Mavis and wrote a short, honest letter. Mr. Elias Thompson, my name is Clara O'Connell. I am 28 years old and was a teacher in Melbourne. I lost my position due to a false accusation and have no family or prospects here. I can read, write, cook, and care for a house. I am not beautiful, but I am healthy and hardworking. If you are still seeking a wife, I agree to meet you. Respectfully, Clara O'Connell. She sent the letter the next day and tried not to build up expectations. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Clara had almost forgotten about it when one March morning, Mrs. Mavis knocked on her door with an envelope in her hand. A reply arrived for you, the woman said with poorly disguised curiosity. Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. The handwriting was firm, slanted, that of a man accustomed to drawing plans. Mrs. O'Connell, thank you for your letter. I am also without family. I also know what it is like to be judged wrongly. If you accept, I will send you money for the train fare to Hope Valley, and from there the buggy to Maclay's Gap. Let me know the date, and I will be waiting. Cordially, Elias Thompson. Inside the envelope were 50 shillings in folded notes. It was enough money for the fare, and even left some over for new clothing if she wanted. Clara held the notes carefully, as if they were made of glass. At that moment she didn't feel love. She felt relief. She felt that maybe she wouldn't die of hunger in a forgotten city boarding house. She felt that someone, somewhere, had given her a second chance. She wrote back, marking the date. 2 weeks later, on a cold autumn morning that arrived early in the high country, Clara O'Connell boarded the train with a worn leather suitcase that had belonged to her aunts and a heart full of mixed fear and hope. The train journey to Hope Valley lasted 7 hours. Clara spent the time looking out the dusty window, watching the endless fields stretch out, the red termite mounds like church towers, the sun-scorched corn crops. She thought about Elias Thompson. She tried to imagine his face. Would he be tall? Would he be gentle? Would he be a man of his word? At Hope Valley, she alighted at the small wooden station and looked for the buggy Elias had promised to send. She found a thin driver with a drooping mustache who greeted her by taking off his hat. "The lady is Mr. Thompson's bride," he asked, more as a confirmation than a question. Clara nodded, and he took her suitcase carefully. She climbed onto the box beside him, and the buggy rattled off down the dirt road. The driver wasn't talkative, but he wasn't rude. After an hour of silence, Clara mustered the courage to ask how much further it was. He scratched his beard before answering that it was about 4 more hours of travel. She swallowed hard and asked what Maclay's Gap was like. The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "Small town," he said. "Good people, but suspicious. It's at the foot of the ranges. A beautiful place, if the lady likes the bush and the silence." Clara wanted to ask about Elias, but didn't know how. The driver seemed to read her thoughts because he said without her asking, "Mr. Thompson is a straight-up man. Works well, pays on time, keeps to himself, been living alone for a long time. The lady is the 4th one to come." Clara felt her stomach freeze. "The 4th?" she repeated slowly. The driver realized he had talked too much and fell silent. But Clara insisted. "What happened to the other 3? She asked with a firm voice despite the fear. The man sighed deeply and decided she deserved to know. They came, saw the house, left the same day, all 3 of them. The last one left crying. Said she couldn't sleep in a place like that, not even if they paid her. Clara's heart beat faster. "What place?" she asked. The driver looked at her sideways. "Mr. Thompson's house is on the edge of a gully," he explained slowly. "There's a deep chasm right behind it. The wind hits hard, the house creaks, and there's a sad history behind it, but it's not my place to tell it. The lady will see when she arrives." Clara spent the rest of the journey in a silence full of thoughts. She thought about turning back. She thought about asking the driver to turn around. But then she remembered Mrs. Mavis's boarding house. The pitying looks of the other women. The hunger that squeezed at the end of the month. Elias's letter, which had been respectful and honest. She decided that she wasn't going to run away before seeing with her own eyes. The sun was starting to set when the buggy entered the township of Maclay's Gap. It was smaller than Clara imagined. A main dirt road, about 20 houses of timber and corrugated iron, a small church with a single spire, a little store with a veranda where some men were playing dominoes. The driver greeted some people who looked at Clara with curiosity. "Thompson's new bride," shouted a toothless old man sitting on the veranda. "God bless her, she'll need it." The buggy did not stop in the township. It continued up a road that climbed the hill, becoming narrower and more surrounded by bush. The afternoon cooled quickly. Clara adjusted her shawl over her shoulders. She smelled damp earth, rotting leaves, and something she couldn't identify. The driver guided the horses with a firm hand, but Clara perceived tension in his shoulders. After almost an hour of climbing, the road turned a sharp corner and suddenly opened into a clearing. Clara saw the house and understood everything. The house was made of timber and stone, a solid, well-built structure, with a veranda out front and a corrugated iron roof, but it was less than 20 meters from the edge of an escarpment. Clara could see the chasm from there, from the buggy. She couldn't see the bottom. She only saw grey stones, descending vertically and disappearing into the shadow. The wind rising from down there brought a constant sound, like a deep, grave breath. The house was sideways to the cliff, as if trying not to look at it directly, but the proximity was terrifying. Clara imagined waking up at night, imagined sleepwalking, imagined one of the horses getting scared and running in the wrong direction. She felt vertigo just thinking about it. The driver stopped the buggy and got down slowly. Clara remained seated, clinging to the edge of the seat. She couldn't take her eyes off the escarpment. The man took her suitcase and put it on the ground. "Do you want me to wait?" he asked in a low voice. Clara didn't answer immediately. Part of her screamed for her to say, "Yes, wait, I'm leaving with you." But then the door of the house opened. Elias Thompson came out onto the veranda, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, like someone who worked with heavy timber, dark hair cut short, beard carefully trimmed, wearing denim trousers and a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He had an angular face, prominent cheekbones, deep eyes. He wasn't handsome in the common sense, but there was something about him that drew attention, a stillness, a solidity. He descended the 3 steps of the veranda slowly, as if he were afraid of scaring a skittish animal. He stopped about 5 meters from the buggy and took off the straw hat he was wearing. "Mrs. O'Connell," he said with a deep, measured voice. "Welcome." Clara forced her legs to move. She got down from the buggy, grasping the side to keep from falling because she was dizzy. She stepped onto the dirt ground and stood still, not knowing what to do with her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she managed to say. Her voice came out hoarse. Elias looked at her as if he were memorizing every detail. Clara was too thin, she knew it. Her travel dress was faded and patched on the right cuff. Her brown hair, pulled back in a low bun, had loose strands because of the travel wind. She wasn't a woman who would draw attention on a crowded street, but she had clear, intelligent eyes, and there was dignity in the way she held her head erect. Despite the visible fear, Elias turned to the driver and paid the agreed amount. The man thanked him, wished both of them luck, and climbed into the buggy. Before leaving, he looked at Clara one more time. "If you need anything, send word to the township," he told her. Clara nodded. The buggy turned and disappeared around the road's curve. Silence fell between them. Only the wind rising from the escarpment filled the space. Elias took Clara's suitcase. "It's light," he said, surprised. She replied that she didn't have many things. He nodded, as if he understood exactly what that meant. "I'll show you the house," Elias said. Clara followed him up to the veranda. The planks creaked under her feet. It wasn't the creak of rotten wood. It was the sound of new timber pressed by weight, but it was a constant and unsettling noise. With every step, the floor complained. Elias opened the door and let Clara enter first. Inside, the house was simple but well-maintained. Living room with a solid timber table, handmade chairs, a cast-iron wood stove in the corner that served as the kitchen. It smelled of sawdust and linseed oil. Everything clean, everything organized, but cold. Cold like a place where a person dwells but does not live. "There are 2 bedrooms, Elias explained, pointing to 2 doors. "One is mine. The other can be yours until we are properly married in the church. Father Michael comes every fortnight. He'll arrive next week. If the lady wants to wait until then, there's no problem." Clara looked at him, surprised. Elias continued without meeting her eyes. "I know the lady traveled far and doesn't know me. I won't force anything. Marriage is for life and requires respect. The lady can decide if she stays or if she leaves. No one will judge you." At that moment, Clara realized 2 things. First, Elias Thompson was a man of honor. Second, he was just as scared as she was. "Thank you," Clara said with a firmer voice. "I will stay until I know you better." Elias nodded, and something resembling relief crossed his face. He showed her the room that would be hers. It was small, with a single bed covered with a patchwork quilt, a dark wood chest of drawers, a window that faced the side of the house, not the chasm. Clara placed the suitcase on top of the bed. "I'll make some tea," Elias said. "The lady must be hungry." Clara realized she was famished. She had only eaten hard bread on the train. She followed Elias back to the living room and sat in one of the chairs while he moved around the stove. She observed his hands, large, calloused hands, with small scars from chisels and adzes, hands that knew how to make things. Elias prepared strong black tea in a metal cup, sliced thick pieces of damper, fried pork sausages in lard, and put everything on the table without ceremony. "Eat while it's hot," he said. Clara ate slowly at first, then faster, because the food was good, and she didn't know when her last proper meal had been. Elias ate in silence, looking at his own cup. After cleaning the dishes in the wash basin, Clara mustered the courage to ask what had been stuck in her throat since she arrived. "Why is the house so close to the gully?" she asked. Elias remained motionless for a long time. Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. But then he sat down again, rested his elbows on the table, and interlaced his fingers. "Because I'm stubborn and an idiot," he said, in an emotionless voice. "This property was mine. I had another house here, about 15 meters further forward. It was a good house. I lived there with my wife and my little girl. That was 8 years ago." Clara held her breath. Elias continued. "In April of 1904, it rained for 3 weeks straight. The ground got soaked. I was in the township working on a big order. When I returned at night, half the land had slipped. The house had gone with it. I found my wife, Sarah, and my daughter, little Ruby, the next day, under the earth and stones. The silence that followed was as heavy as a tombstone." Clara felt tears burning her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I am so sorry," she whispered. Elias nodded slowly. "The people in the township told me to abandon the place. They said it was dangerous, that it could slide again, that it was cursed. But I didn't want to leave. I built this new house on what was left of the land. Further back, where the rock is solid, I hired a builder from Hope Valley to ensure the foundations were firm. The house won't fall, but it's close to the escarpment, and the wind comes up from there and makes noise, and people are afraid." Clara understood everything. She understood why 3 women had fled. She understood why Elias lived alone. She understood the pain he carried like a weight on his back, and she understood that this man was not looking for love. He was looking for someone who wouldn't abandon him. Night fell quickly. Elias lit a kerosene lamp that cast a yellowish light in the living room. Clara helped wash the dishes. They worked side by side in a silence that was not uncomfortable. When they finished, Elias said he was going to sleep early because he woke up with the sun. "If the lady needs anything during the night, my room is there," he pointed. "You can knock on the door." Clara thanked him and went to her own room. She closed the door, sat on the bed, and finally let her body tremble. She was afraid. She was afraid of the escarpment, afraid of the creaking house, afraid of the sad story that lived in the walls. But she also felt something else. She felt pity for Elias. She felt respect for his stubbornness, and she had a strange curiosity to know the man behind the pain. She changed her clothes, blew out the candle, and lay down. The bed was hard but clean. The sheet smelled of lea soap. The wind rose from the escarpment, bringing a constant sound that seemed like a moan. The house creaked occasionally, adjusting to the cold of the night. Clara closed her eyes and tried to sleep. She woke up in the middle of the night to a different sound. It wasn't the wind. It was a choked sob coming from the other room. Clara lay motionless, her heart beating fast. The crying continued. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of a man who didn't want to be heard, the sound of ancient pain that had no cure. Clara stayed awake until the crying stopped. Only then did she manage to sleep again, with the strange feeling that she had entered a story much bigger than she imagined. Clara woke up to the gray light of dawn, entering through the crack in the window. It took a few seconds to remember where she was. The smell of sawdust, the low creak of the house responding to the wind, the distant sound of water running somewhere down below in the gully. Everything came back suddenly. The journey, Elias, the house on the edge of the chasm, the choked sob she heard the night before. She sat up in bed and rubbed her face with her hands. The room was cold. She put the shawl over her nightgown and went to the window. She opened the thin, faded curtains of cheap fabric and looked out. The view took her breath away. She couldn't see the escarpment from that side of the house, but she could see the ranges stretching in green and brown waves as far as the eye could see. The sky was clean, pearl-colored, and the sun was beginning to gild the tops of the tallest trees. She heard noise coming from the living room. Elias was already awake. Clara quickly dressed in the navy blue work dress that had invisible patches on the sleeves. She pulled her hair back into a tight bun, washed her face in the cold water basin in the room, and went out. Elias was in the kitchen preparing tea. He turned his head when he heard her arrival. "Good morning," he said, with the hoarse voice of someone speaking the first words of the day. Clara replied, "Good morning," and stood still, not knowing where to stand. Elias pointed to the table. "Sit down, it's ready." He served strong black tea, damper, and some sweet slice. They ate in silence. Clara noticed that Elias had deep circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well either. She thought about the crying she heard, but didn't say anything. Some pains were too big to be talked about at breakfast. When he finished, Elias pushed his chair back and stood up. "I'm going to work in the workshop," he said. "It's at the back of the house. If the lady needs me, just call out." Clara nodded. He took his hat hanging on the nail near the door and left. She heard his boots hitting the wood of the veranda, then the steps moving away. She was alone. She looked around, trying to decide what to do. The house was clean, but it had that feeling of a place where no one cared about the details. Everything functional, nothing welcoming. Clara decided that if she was going to stay there, even if only for a few days, she needed to feel useful. She started by washing the breakfast dishes. Then she swept the wide plank floor. She found a rag and soap and cleaned the table, the chairs, the windowsill. She shook out the bed covers, opened the windows to let the air circulate, even with the cold wind coming in, bringing the smell of earth and bush. She was finishing when she heard a rhythmic sound coming from the back. Timber being sawn, precise hammering. Clara felt curious, put on her shawl, and went out the back door. The workshop was a separate building, about 20 meters from the house, with open walls at the top for ventilation. Clara approached slowly. Elias was bent over a wide bench, working on a piece of timber that looked like the leg of a chair. He wore a leather apron over his shirt. The muscles of his forearms moved as he adjusted the plane. Golden sawdust fell to the floor like fine rain. He noticed her presence and stopped. Clara stayed in the entrance without stepping in. "Excuse the interruption," she said. "I just wanted to know if you lunch at home, Mr. Thompson." Elias wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "I do. Around midday, more or less. There are provisions in the pantry. Does the lady know how to cook?" Clara said yes. Elias returned to work. She stayed there a moment longer, observing. There was something mesmerizing about the way he worked. Confident movements, a deep knowledge of the material in his hands. The timber reacted to his tools as if it wanted to become what he planned. She returned to the house and explored the pantry. She found a sack of rice, beans, smoked bacon, hanging onions, garlic, dried pepper, coarse salt. There were chickens in the yard. Clara collected eggs from the makeshift nest under the veranda. The chickens cackled irritably, but didn't peck. She cooked rice with garlic and salt, charro beans with bacon, and scrambled eggs with coriander that she found in an abandoned planta next to the house. When the sun was high, she went out and called Elias. He came, wiping his hands on the apron, with the smell of fresh timber clinging to him. They sat down for lunch. Elias ate slowly, chewing well, like a man who learned to appreciate home-cooked food after years of eating alone. In the end, he pushed the empty plate away and looked at Clara for the first time with something that wasn't just politeness. "That was good," he said. "It's been a long time since I've eaten food made with such care." Clara felt a strange warmth in her chest. "Thank you." Elias stayed there a moment longer, as if he wanted to say something more, but he didn't. He got up and returned to the workshop. The days began to follow a rhythm. Clara woke up early, prepared tea, took care of the house. Elias worked in the workshop until the light disappeared. They ate together in a silence that became less uncomfortable with each meal. At night, Elias sometimes stayed on the veranda, smoking a rollie, looking at nothing. Clara stayed inside, mending his clothes that she found torn, or simply sitting near the lamp with a book she had brought from the capital. One night, 5 days after she arrived, Elias came in and saw her reading. He stood in the doorway. "What are you reading, Mrs. O'Connell?" he asked. Clara showed him the cover. "It's a book of poetry, by Banjo Patterson." Elias made a face like he didn't know it. Clara asked if he liked to read. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I can barely read well," he confessed. "I learned the basics, but I never had the knack. My focus has always been working with my hands." Clara closed the book. "I can read aloud if you'd like, Mr. Thompson." Elias hesitated. "I don't want to bother you." Clara shook her head. "It's no bother. I like reading to someone." Elias sat in the chair on the other side of the table. Clara opened the book and began to read poetry about freedom, about love, about suffering. Her voice was clear and firm, accustomed to teaching children, but it had a softness when she pronounced the verses. Elias remained motionless, listening, his eyes fixed on the lamp, but she knew he was paying attention. When the poem ended, Elias remained silent. Then he said in a low voice, "It's beautiful. There's hope in those words." Clara agreed. "Sometimes that's all we have," she said. "Hope that things can get better." Elias looked at her. Then he looked at her for real, "And do you still have hope?" he asked. "After losing your job, your reputation, having to come to a forgotten place to marry a stranger?" Clara held his gaze. "Yes, I do, because giving up is dying before your time, and I'm not ready to die yet." Something changed on Elias's face. It wasn't a smile, but it was less heavy. "Me neither," he said. "Then I think we have that in common." That night, Clara didn't hear crying coming from his room. The following week brought more changes. Clara began planting herbs in the abandoned planter. She fixed a hole in the chicken coop roof. She washed all the bed linen and hung it on the makeshift clothesline. Elias noticed. He didn't speak much, but Clara saw it in the small gestures. He brought good soil from the creek bank for her planter. He fixed the wobbly kitchen chair. He left wildflowers on the table one morning without saying anything, just small yellow flowers that grew near the bush. Clara picked up the flowers and felt something clench in her chest. It was a simple gesture, but coming from a man who had lived in his own pain for years, it meant a lot. If you're enjoying this story, please leave a like to help me out. It makes all the difference. On the 10th day, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of a buggy arriving. She paused with the sheet in her hands and saw an old buggy pulled by a horse climbing the road. A robust woman about 60 years old was driving, dressed in dark clothes and a scarf on her head. She stopped in front of the house and got down with surprising agility for her age. "You must be Clara," the woman said in a strong voice. "I'm Maureen. I have a store in the township. I came to meet the brave woman who stayed." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went to greet her. Maureen had a sun-weathered face, small, lively eyes, and a wide smile. "I brought some bits and pieces," she said, opening her cloth bag. "Fresh flour, guava jam, and this fabric here that I thought would look nice on you." "I won't take no for an answer." Clara was speechless. Maureen laughed. "You can stand there with your mouth open later. Now, show me this house that everyone's so scared of." They went in together. Maureen looked at everything with critical eyes but without fear. "Good house," she said. "Thompson knows his trade. It's a shame people are superstitious." Clara offered tea. They sat at the table, and Maureen began to talk. She talked about the township, the families, who was who. She said she had known Elias since he arrived there more than 10 years ago, recently married, full of plans. She spoke of the accident with genuine sadness, but without melodrama. "His mistake was building here again," Maureen said. "Not an engineering mistake, a head mistake. He got trapped in grief. He thinks if he leaves, he'll be betraying the memory of Sarah and little Ruby, but life is for the living. I hope you help him understand that." Clara asked softly why Maureen was being so kind to her. The older woman took Clara's hand firmly. "Because I also know what it's like to be judged wrongly, because this world is tough enough as it is, and we need to help each other. And because I saw Elias's face when he said you had stayed. For the first time in years, that man had hope in his eyes." Maureen left after an hour, but before going, she made Clara promise that she would go to the township at least once a week. "You have to show yourself," she said. "Let people see that you're a good person. The more you hide here, the more they'll invent stories," Clara promised. She stood watching the buggy go down the road, feeling a warm gratitude spread through her body. She had made a friend a small thing, but it meant a world of difference. That night, she told Elias about the visit. He nodded. "Maureen's a good person, one of the few who didn't turn their back on me." He hesitated and then continued. "If the lady wants to see the township, I'll take you tomorrow. I need to deliver some chairs commissioned by the church." Clara accepted. The next day, they got into Elias's buggy early. It was the first time Clara had gone down that road since she arrived. The morning was clear, the air cold, but without wind. Elias drove in silence, but Clara noticed he looked at her from time to time, as if wanting to make sure she was okay. When they entered the township, some people stopped to look. Elias stopped the buggy in front of the church. Father Michael was sweeping the entrance. He was a young man, no more than 30, thin and tall, his cassock patched but clean. "Elias, my son," he greeted with a warm smile. "And this must be Mrs. Clara. You are most welcome." Clara immediately liked him. The father helped Elias unload the chairs, praised the work, and paid the agreed amount. Then he invited Clara to see the church. It was small but well-maintained, smelling of incense and candle wax. Father Michael showed her the pews, the simple altar, the statue of Our Lady of Sorrows. They talked about life in the township, about the school that hadn't had a teacher since the last one married and moved to the capital. The father's eyes lit up. "The lady was a teacher, wasn't she?" Clara confirmed. He clasped his hands. "It's a sign from God. The children here need to learn so much." Clara felt something stir inside her. Possibility. Purpose. She said she would think about the matter. The father blessed both of them, and they left. They went to Maureen's store. The woman received Clara like a queen. She introduced her to everyone there. Some people were polite, others kept their distance. Clara heard whispers. Poor thing. She doesn't know what she's gotten into. She won't last a month. But she didn't care. She was accustomed to judgment. They were leaving the store when a tall man, riding a chestnut horse, stopped in front of them. He wore good clothes, a worked leather hat, boots with silver spurs. He was in his 40s, with a full face, a well-trimmed moustache, and the expression of someone accustomed to giving orders. Elias, he called out with a voice that tried to be friendly, but had something false underneath. I heard you finally got a wife who'd stay. Congratulations. Elias tensed up. Clara felt it. Thanks, Reg, Elias replied in a neutral voice. Reg looked at Clara with eyes that evaluated, measured, weighed. So, miss, are you enjoying the house on the edge of the cliff? Aren't you afraid of falling during the night? Clara raised her chin. The house is solid and well built. I'm not afraid. Reg laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful laugh. Brave or simple. I don't know which is worse. He looked at Elias. My offer still stands, Elias. £2,500 for the property is more than it's worth. With that money, you can buy better land, far from the tragedy. You can start a new life with your new wife. Elias clenched his fists. I already said I'm not selling. The land is mine, and I'll die on it. Reg sighed as if out of pity. Stubbornness will be the death of you, and now it will be the death of her too. If you truly care about that woman, get her out of that place before another tragedy happens. He mounted his horse and left without waiting for an answer. Clara looked at Elias. He was pale, his jaw locked. Let's go, he said hoarsely. They returned in silence. The journey back seemed longer. When they arrived, Elias got out of the buggy too quickly, almost stumbling. He went straight to the workshop without saying anything. Clara stood there, holding the package with the groceries she had bought at the store, feeling a strange weight in her chest. She went into the house, put the things away, and started preparing lunch. But her head was elsewhere. She thought about Reginald Dalton. She thought about his offer. £2,500 was money. A new life away from here. Why wouldn't Elias accept? After lunch, which Elias ate in complete silence, Clara couldn't stand it. She asked directly, Why won't you sell the land to Reg, Mr. Thompson? Elias slowly raised his eyes. Because he doesn't want the land. He wants access to the creek that runs through here. It has clean water all year round. He wants to divert it to irrigate his grazing fields. If I sell, he'll dry up the creek, and the people living downstream will be left without water. 3 families depend on that water. I won't be responsible for that. Clara felt ashamed for having doubted him. I'm sorry, she said in a low voice. I didn't know. Elias shook his head. No one knows. Reg is cunning. He says he wants to help me, but what he wants is the creek, and he'll keep pressuring me until I give up or die. He looked at Clara with something dangerously close to despair. That's why I understand if the lady wants to leave. It's not an easy life here, and there are powerful people trying to push me out. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke slowly, choosing her words. I lost my job because a powerful person decided I was in her way. I could have fought, but I gave up. I ran away. I came here because I had no other option. She looked him in the eyes. But now I understand one thing. Sometimes you have to stay and fight, not out of pride, but because it's the right thing to do, and I didn't come all this way just to run away again. Elias stood still. His expression changed. It wasn't just relief, it was something bigger. It was recognition. As if he were truly seeing Clara for the first time. You are a rare woman, Clara O'Connell, he said in a low, hoarse voice. I don't deserve your loyalty, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Clara felt warmth rise to her cheeks. It wasn't just gratitude she saw in his eyes. It was the beginning of something more, something that frightened and warmed at the same time. The following days were different. Elias started talking more. He told her about his work, the orders he had, the plans to expand the workshop. Clara told him about her years as a teacher, the students she had loved, the pain of being unjustly accused. They talked at night, near the lamp. Sometimes Clara read, sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. One afternoon, Elias returned from the workshop earlier than usual. Clara was in the yard trying to mend the chicken wire fence. He approached. Let me do that, he said. Clara protested, saying she could. Elias smiled faintly. The first true smile she had seen from him. I know you can. but it will be better if we do it together." They worked side by side. Elias held the planks. Clara hammered the nails. He taught her the correct way to hit, so they wouldn't bend. Their hands touched when they grasped the hammer at the same time. Both froze. Elias didn't immediately withdraw his hand. He stayed there, his callous skin touching her thin fingers. Time stretched. "Sorry," he said finally, withdrawing his hand. Clara immediately felt the lack of contact. "You don't need to apologize," she replied, her voice lower than she intended. They finished the fence in a silence, laden with unspoken things. That night, after dinner, Elias didn't go to the workshop as he usually did. He stayed inside the house. Clara was washing the dishes when he approached. "Can I help dry?" he asked. Clara nodded. They worked together. Clara washed, passing the wet plates. Elias dried with a patched tea towel. His arm brushed hers occasionally. Each touch was a spark. When they finished, Elias didn't move away immediately. He stood beside her. "Clara," he said slowly. She turned her head to look at him. They were very close. She could see the gray hairs starting at his temples, the small wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, the thin scar above his left eyebrow. "I wanted to thank you," Elias continued, "for staying, for not running away, for making me feel that maybe I'm not completely alone in the world." Clara felt her heart beat faster. "You are not alone, and neither am I anymore." She hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. She felt the muscles tense beneath the cotton shirt. "We are together now." Elias looked at her hand on his arm as if it were a treasure. He covered her hand with his large, calloused fingers wrapped around hers carefully, as if she were made of porcelain. They stayed like that for a long moment. Neither of them moved. Neither of them wanted the moment to end. It was Clara who withdrew her hand first, her face hot. "It's getting late," she said. Elias agreed, his voice hoarse. "Good night, Clara." It was the first time he had said her name, without the Mrs. first. "Good night, Elias," she replied. Lying in bed later, Clara stayed awake looking at the ceiling. She thought about Elias's hands holding hers. She thought about the way he had looked at her. She thought about how, in 2 weeks, that silent man had begun to occupy an increasingly large space in her thoughts. It wasn't love yet, but it was a beginning. It was possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Clara wasn't afraid of the future. The next morning brought a change in the air. Clara woke up, feeling a different weight in the atmosphere. The sky was gray, low, heavy clouds gathering over the ranges. The wind had changed direction. Now it came from above, instead of rising from the escarpment, bringing the smell of distant rain and wet earth. Elias was already in the kitchen when she left the room. He was looking out the window with a worried expression. "Good morning," Clara said. He turned, and his face softened when he saw her. "Good morning. It's going to rain heavily today. Spring storm, the worst kind." Clara approached the window. The more distant trees were already swaying with the force of the approaching wind. "Is there any danger?" she asked. Elias hesitated before answering. "For the house?" "No, the foundations are solid, but the gully gets dangerous. Stones can come loose, and the noise gets loud." They prepared tea in silence. Elias added quickly and stood up. "I'm going to check everything before the rain hits. Close the workshop windows. Tie down anything that might blow away. You stay inside the house when it starts, understood?" Clara promised she would. She spent the morning preparing food, closing the house windows tightly, placing buckets in the spots where the roof leaked when it rained hard. Elias had shown her those spots a few days before. The house was good, but it was 8 years old, and time took its toll. The first drop fell around midday, thick, heavy, hitting the roof like a stone. Then came another and another, and then the sky opened up. The rain fell with a violence Clara had never seen. Curtains of water so dense you couldn't see the workshop out back. The wind howled, hitting the walls. The house creaked louder than usual, timber groaning under pressure. And from the escarpment came a sound that chilled the blood, a deep, hollow echo, as if the earth were screaming. Elias came in soaked, water dripping from his hat and clothes. He took off his boots at the entrance, so as not to wet the floor. Clara brought a towel. He dried his face and neck but remained tense. His ears were attentive to the sounds of the storm. They had lunch with the deafening noise of the rain all around. Lightning tore across the gray sky. Thunder shook the windows. With every loud flash, Clara flinched. Elias noticed. "Are you afraid of the lightning?" he asked. Clara admitted she was. "Since I was a girl." Elias reached out his hand across the table. "You can take it if it helps," he said simply. Clara looked at his big, calloused hand. She didn't think much. She just placed her hand in his. Elias's fingers closed around hers, firm and warm. They stayed like that, hands entwined on the table, while the storm roared outside. The afternoon was long. The rain didn't let up. The wind blew ever stronger. Elias eventually let go of Clara's hand, but he stayed inside the house with her, which was unusual. He kept pacing to the window, looking outside with a worry he tried to hide, but couldn't completely. Clara tried to read but couldn't concentrate. The noise was constant and oppressive, and there was something more, a tension coming from Elias, that she felt but didn't completely understand. He was afraid, not of the lightning, but of something deeper. When night began to fall, the rain had lessened a little, but the wind continued to rage. Elias lit the lamp earlier than usual. The yellowish light cast dancing shadows on the walls. Clara prepared a simple dinner, bean soup with bacon and damper heated on the stove. They were eating when they heard it. A different sound. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the rain, it was a dull roar coming from the direction of the escarpment. The house trembled slightly. The dishes on the table vibrated. Elias turned pale. He stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. He stood listening, his whole body tense as a guitar string. Clara also stood up, her heart pounding. "What was that?" she asked. "Landslide," Elias replied in a hoarse voice. "Small one still, but if it keeps raining." He didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. Another roar. Closer. This time the house trembled harder. The lamp swung from the ceiling. Clara grabbed the edge of the table. "Sarah and Ruby," Elias whispered with real fear in his voice. Now he turned to her. His eyes were wild, scared. But when he saw the fear on her face, something changed. He took a deep breath, forcing calm. "Come here," he said, extending his hand. Clara went to him without hesitation. Elias pulled her close, strong arms enveloping her. Clara rested her face on his chest and listened to his heart beating fast beneath his damp shirt. "The house will hold," Elias said in a firmer voice. "The foundations are on solid rock now. It won't happen like—" He stopped. Clara knew what he was going to say. Like it happened to the other house, with Sarah and Ruby. They stayed embraced. While the storm attacked outside, Elias smelled of sweat, sawdust, and rain. Clara felt the warmth of his body through the wet clothes. She felt the strength of his arms holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And she realized that she didn't want to be anywhere else. Another roar. The house trembled, but Elias didn't let go of her. They held onto each other while the earth groaned and slid down below in the gully, while the rain hit the roof, while the wind tried to tear off the walls. She didn't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes or hours, but eventually, the worst passed. The rain lessened to a drizzle, the wind subsided, the roars stopped. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Elias slowly loosened his arms, but didn't let go of Clara completely. She raised her head to look at him. Their faces were very close. Clara could feel his breath on her face. She saw every detail of his brown eyes, the little golden specks she had never noticed before. "Clara," Elias whispered. His voice came out hoarse, loaded with emotion. "I." He stopped. He swallowed hard, then started again. "I can't pretend anymore. Not after today. Not after feeling how terrified I was of losing you." Clara's heart was beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. Elias raised his hand and touched her face with infinite care, as if afraid she might disappear. "You brought life back to this house. You brought light. You brought a reason for me to wake up in the morning wanting to live the day, not just survive it. And I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've been in love for a long time and just didn't have the courage to admit it." Clara felt tears burning her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness. They were of relief, of joy, of something big and terrifying being born inside her chest. "Me too," she whispered. "I don't know when it started, but it's here, in my heart. You." Elias closed his eyes as if her words were absolution for ancient sins. When he opened them again, there was determination in them. "Can I kiss you?" he asked in a low voice. Clara nodded without being able to speak. Elias leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she didn't change. His lips touched hers with a softness that contradicted the strength of his body. A lingering kiss, tender, full of promises. Clara felt the world disappear. There was only the two of them, the warmth, the connection, the certainty that she had found her home, not in the walls, but in that man. When they separated, Elias rested his forehead on hers. "I'm going to marry you for real," he said, with a vow, with a party, with a ring. "I want you to be my wife, not just on paper, but in my heart. Do you accept?" Clara smiled, with tears streaming down her face. "I accept now. I accept everything you, this house, this life, I accept. They kissed again, deeper this time, years of loneliness on both sides dissolving in that touch. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Elias ran his thumb across Clara's face, wiping away the tears. I never thought I would feel this again, he confessed. Love, hope, fear of losing something precious. You made me live again, Clara. And you gave me a place to belong, she replied. Family, purpose, future. They slept that night, each in their own room still, because Elias was a man of principles and wanted to do things properly. But before separating, they stood for long minutes in the doorway of Clara's room, hands entwined, low words of affection being exchanged, light kisses being stolen. When they finally said goodnight, both knew that something fundamental had changed between them. The next morning dawned clean. The sky was washed, deep blue, without a single cloud. The air smelled of wet earth and new leaves. The birds sang, celebrating the end of the storm. Clara woke up with a feeling of lightness she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a dream. Elias had told her he loved her. He had proposed marriage for real. She left the room and found Elias already awake, preparing tea. He turned when he heard her, and the smile that spread across his face made her heart melt. Good morning, my love, he said, testing the words. Clara felt warmth rise to her cheeks but smiled back. Good morning. They had tea together with light conversation and glances that spoke more than words. Then, Elias became serious. I need to check the damage from the landslide. Do you want to come with me? Clara agreed. For the first time since she arrived, she went to the edge of the escarpment with Elias. He held her hand firmly as they approached. The ground was wet and slippery. Clara could see where large chunks of earth had given way during the night. Whole trees had fallen down the gully. The path of destruction was visible on the side of the cliff. But the area where the house stood, the rock foundations that Elias had carefully chosen, was intact, solid, safe. Look, Elias said, pointing. The rock here is different, harder. That's why I built here. He looked at Clara. The old house was there. He pointed to an empty area about 15 meters further forward, closer to the edge. The ground there is earth over stone. When it gets soaked, it slides. I knew that when I rebuilt. That's why I chose this spot. Clara understood. Elias's stubbornness wasn't irrational. It was calculated. He hadn't built on top of his family's tomb out of madness. He had built as close as possible that was safe. It was his way of honoring the dead without killing himself in the process. They stood there on the edge, looking at the escarpment together. Clara squeezed his hand. Do you know what I think? She said slowly. I think it's time you made a proper memorial for Sarah and Ruby, something beautiful. And then we can think about building a new house, not here, but somewhere closer to the township, where our children can play without us being afraid they'll fall. Elias was very quiet. Clara was afraid she had said too much, touched a wound she shouldn't have, but then he squeezed her hand back. Our children? He repeated in a wondering voice. You think about having children with me? Clara turned to look at him. I do. God willing, a real family. She hesitated. I know Sarah and Ruby will always be in your heart, and I don't want to take their place, but maybe there's room for a new family too. New love that doesn't erase the old, but grows beside it. Elias pulled her into a tight hug. You are a wise woman, Clara O'Connell, and you're right. It's time for me to stop living in the past, to make a proper memorial and build a future with you, in a place where our children grow up safe and happy. They returned home hand in hand. Elias went to work in the workshop, but he returned to the house every hour just to see Clara, steal a quick kiss, exchange a loving word. Clara floated through her household tasks. She hummed as she did the laundry, smiled as she cooked. The world had brighter colors. 3 days later, on a sunny afternoon, they heard the sound of a horse approaching. It wasn't Maureen's buggy, it was a single horse. Elias went out to see who it was and tensed up. Reginald Dalton dismounted with a serious expression. I heard there was a big landslide here during the storm, he said bluntly. I came to check if everything is all right and to offer my help if needed. Elias crossed his arms. Everything is fine. The house held firm. I don't need help. Reg looked around, his eyes assessing the visible damage to the landscape. Elias, be sensible. This will happen again. Next big storm. It could be worse. You have a wife now. You have a responsibility. My offer is up to 2,500. Accept and go live in peace. Far from here. Elias took a step forward. I already said I'm not selling, and you already know why. You don't want this land. You want the creek, and I won't let you dry up the water the families down there need. Reg lost his mask of friendliness. His face hardened. "You are stubborn and an idiot, Elias, and you'll regret it. There are ways to get what I want without buying your miserable land." Clara came out onto the veranda at that moment. She had heard everything from the window. She stood beside Elias, shoulder touching shoulder with him. "My husband has already said he doesn't want to sell," she said in a firm voice. "I suggest you respect his decision and leave." Reg looked at her with contempt. "You're a teacher?" "No, an educated woman. You should have better judgment. Don't let this hard-headed man drag you into a tragedy. If you've made it this far, click the subscribe button so you don't miss the next stories. It makes all the difference to me." Clara raised her chin. "My husband is a man of honor, something you clearly don't understand. Now, leave our property." Reg mounted his horse with poorly contained rage. "You'll regret this!" He spat out the words. He galloped away, kicking up dust. Elias turned to Clara with an expression of admiration and something more. "You defended me." Clara smiled. "Of course, I defended you. We are family now, and family protects each other." Elias pulled her in for a kiss right there on the veranda under the afternoon sun, not caring if anyone saw. When they separated, he said in a hoarse voice, "I'm going to talk to Father Michael tomorrow. Set the wedding date as soon as possible. I can't stand calling you my bride anymore. I want to call you my wife." Clara agreed with her heart overflowing. The next day, they went to the township together. Father Michael was beaming with the news. They set the wedding for 2 weeks later. The father insisted on having a small party afterwards at the church hall. Maureen offered to make the sweets and organize everything. The news spread through the township. Some people turned up their noses, but most were genuinely happy. Elias was respected, even if misunderstood, and Clara was gaining respect for having stayed. The 2 weeks passed in preparation. Clara sewed a simple but beautiful dress, with the fabric Maureen had given her, white with lace at the neck and cuffs. Elias had simple silver rings made by a jeweler in the neighboring town. They cleaned the house from top to bottom. They made plans for the future. The night before the wedding, sitting on the veranda under the stars, Elias spoke about an idea that had been brewing. "I've been thinking about what you said about building a new house, and I think you're right. We can sell some furniture I made, save money, buy better land, closer to the township, make a memorial here for Sarah and Ruby, but build our life somewhere else." Clara took his hand. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel like you're abandoning them." He shook his head. "It's not abandoning, it's letting go. It's understanding that honoring the dead doesn't mean staying trapped with them. They would want me to be happy. And I am happy with you, Clara, happier than I deserve to be." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "Then we'll do that together, one step at a time." The wedding happened on a clear October morning. The small church was fuller than Clara expected. Half the township came. Maureen was in the front row, crying with joy. Father Michael conducted the ceremony with a beautiful sermon about love that heals wounds and hope that is reborn. When Elias placed the ring on Clara's finger, his hand trembled. When Clara did the same, her eyes were wet. When the father said they could kiss, Elias pulled Clara in for a long, tender kiss that drew sighs and applause from the small congregation. The party at the church hall was simple but joyful. There was damper cake, coconut ice, fudge, strong black tea. People ate, laughed, wished them well. Elias didn't let go of Clara's hand. She shone beside him, her face illuminated with happiness. When evening fell, they returned home for their first day as true husband and wife. Elias carried Clara over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on keeping. She laughed, her arms around his neck. He set her back down slowly but didn't move away. "Finally, I can call you my wife," he said, in a voice hoarse with emotion. "Mrs. Clara Thompson." Clara smiled with good tears in her eyes. "And I can call you my husband, and my love, and my home." That night, for the first time, they shared the same room, the same bed. Elias was gentle and careful. Clara was brave and loving. And when they fell asleep entwined, both knew they had found where they belonged. The following months brought changes. Elias began working on the memorial project for Sarah and Ruby, a small garden in the area where the old house had stood, with a wooden cross carved with his own hands and a stone bench where he could sit and remember. When it was ready, Clara planted flowers around it, white and yellow roses that bloomed in spring. Clara began teaching the children of the township, first informally in their own home. Then, Father Michael secured a small room next to the church. 5 students became 10. 10 became 15. Clara was making a difference again, and this time no one could take it away from her. Elias expanded the workshop. Orders increased when people saw that he was more present, happier, more open. He began saving money for a new piece of land. He looked for options closer to the township. Reginald Dalton tried to pressure them one last time. He went to the Shire Council in Hope Valley to try to get an eviction order, alleging that Elias's property was dangerous. But Father Michael, who had contacts, found out. He mobilized the township. They raised money to hire a solicitor. The solicitor proved that the property was safe, that the accusations were unfounded, and that Reg had a financial interest in the area. The case was dismissed. Reg, furious and publicly humiliated, finally gave up. He sold his own land a few months later and moved to the capital. The township breathed a sigh of relief. 6 months after the wedding, Clara discovered she was expecting a baby. She told Elias one night after dinner. He was speechless. Then he picked her up and spun around with her, laughing and crying at the same time. "A son," he repeated, amazed. "We're going to have a son." The pregnancy was calm. Clara continued teaching until the 7th month. Maureen became a second mother, teaching her everything about childbirth and baby care. Elias became overprotective. He wouldn't let her do anything heavy. He would finish work in the workshop and rush home to make sure she was all right. In June of 1913, on a full moon night, Clara went into labor. Maureen came with the midwife. Elias stayed outside the room, pacing, praying, sweating with nervousness. When he heard the baby cry, he fell to his knees, thanking God. It was a strong, healthy boy, powerful lungs, dark hair just like his father. Elias entered the room, afraid of breaking his son just by looking at him. Clara, exhausted but radiant, put the baby in his arms. "Look what we made," she whispered. "Look at our miracle." Elias looked at his son with reverence. A tear rolled down his face. "We'll call him Callum," he said hoarsely. "Because he's a gift from God," Clara agreed. "Callum Thompson, our boy." Life adjusted to the baby's rhythm. Sleepless nights, nappies, breastfeeding, but also laughter. First smiles, crying that turned into sleep, the immense love that flooded everything. When Callum turned 6 months old, Elias finally found the perfect land, 5 acres, just 2 kilometers from the township. Flat, safe, with a small creek running through the corner, a fair price. They bought it and began building the new house, bigger than the old one, with 3 bedrooms, a large living room, a big kitchen, a veranda all around, and its own workshop out back. The move happened when Callum was 1 year old, on a sunny spring day in 1914. Friends from the township helped. Father Michael blessed the new house. Maureen prepared a party. The house was filled with laughter, food, music. Before closing the old house forever, Elias and Clara went there one last time. They walked through the empty rooms, remembering the moments lived there, the initial fear, the discovery of love, the storms faced together. "Thank you," Elias said to the empty walls, "for protecting me when I needed it, for bringing Clara to me, for being a bridge between my past and my future. But now it's time to move on." Clara took his hand. They left together, closed the door, left the key hanging on the veranda nail in case any traveler needed temporary shelter, and went to the new house, to the new life, to the future they were building together. 3 years later, in 1917, Callum had a little sister. They named her Daisy because that was exactly what she brought: more light, more joy, more love. The new house had a garden that Clara cared for with affection. It had a vegetable patch that provided greens. It had an organized chicken coop. It had Elias's workshop, always with orders. It had a makeshift classroom where Clara taught the alphabet and numbers to the children of the township. Elias never forgot Sarah and Ruby. He visited the memorial regularly. He told Callum and Daisy about the older sister they never knew, and the mother the father loved before. But he spoke without pain. He spoke with affection of good memories, and he always ended by thanking that past love for preparing him to recognize and value the present love. Clara never forgot the house on the edge of the escarpment. Sometimes, when she passed the old road going to the township, she looked up and saw the structure still standing, resisting time, and she thanked that place that had been the stage of her transformation. The place where she had found the courage to stay when everyone else had fled. The place where 2 lonely hearts had learned to beat together. On a warm summer afternoon in 1920, Clara was on the veranda of the new house, rocking Daisy, who had just turned 3. Callum, already 7, played in the garden with a stray dog they had adopted. Elias arrived from the workshop and sat beside her on the rocking chair he had made himself. He looked at his wife, his daughter sleeping in her lap, his son running free and happy, at his house full of life. And he said softly, "Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real." that I got this life, this family, this peace. Clara looked at him with a deep and true love that only grew with the years. It is real, yes, and we both deserve it because we didn't give up, because we had the courage to stay when it was easier to run away, because we believed there was light at the end of the tunnel, even when we only saw darkness. Elias took her hand, the silver ring shining under the afternoon sun. You were my light, Clara. In the darkest moment of my life, you appeared and you stayed, and you taught me that it's worth living again. I love you today, tomorrow, always. Clara smiled, her eyes shining. And I love you today, tomorrow, always. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink. The Thompson family stayed there on the veranda together as the day died, and the night arrived softly. There were no more chasms, there was no more fear. There was only love and future and the certainty that they had found in each other, the only home that truly mattered. 3 women had fled upon seeing the house, but Clara had stayed, and by staying, she had gained not just a husband, she had gained a life, family, purpose, love that healed old wounds and created new hopes. And in the end, she discovered that the true home was never made of walls. It was always made of courage, of choice, and of the heart of someone willing to hold your hand and say, "Stay. We'll build this together." And they built it, brick by brick, day after day, love after love. A life that was worth every moment of fear faced, every storm survived, every step taken towards the light. Because in the end, love always wins. It's always worth it. It always transforms. And it always, always builds homes, where before there was only loneliness. M.